The alien general strode through the command deck of her flagship, her presence commanding attention from every officer and soldier in her path. Her species, the Elthari, prided themselves on discipline and loyalty, and she was their epitome. Her luminous skin glowed faintly under the sterile lights, and her multitonal voice carried authority that silenced lesser beings with a single word. She had led her kind to countless victories, securing their dominance in contested sectors. Yet today, an unease gnawed at her, an instinct honed over decades of warfare. Reports from the front lines poured in, detailing minor skirmishes and troop movements. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but the whispers of discontent she had sensed among the high command echoed louder in her mind. Despite her vigilance, the betrayal was sudden and absolute. A call from the council summoned her for an emergency meeting. She complied, leaving her trusted officers in charge, unaware she would not return to them. Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere was suffocating. The elders, draped in ceremonial garb, faced her with unreadable expressions. The accusations came swiftly, their words laced with venom. Treason. Subversion. Collusion with the enemy. She stood silent as their falsehoods piled higher, her calculated mind piecing together the truth. They feared her influence, her loyalty to the soldiers rather than to their decaying hierarchy. The trial was a farce. Evidence fabricated, witnesses coerced. Her voice, resolute and unwavering, declared her innocence, but it only served to tighten the noose. The sentence was exile and death, a staged execution to ensure her memory would inspire no rebellion. Stripped of her insignias, bound in restraints that hummed with suppression fields, she was escorted by guards she had once trusted implicitly. Each step to the execution chamber was a dagger to her pride. Her soldiers, stationed in the corridors, averted their eyes. Cowards! Their silence was louder than any accusation. But she was no passive victim. As they prepared the chamber, her strategic mind worked furiously. The restraints dulled her abilities but not her will. When the opportunity arose, a momentary lapse in vigilance by a guard, she acted. With a swift movement, she disarmed her captor, her training overcoming their hesitation. The alarms blared, and she raced through the sterile halls, the betrayal fueling her resolve. The escape pod bay was heavily guarded, as she expected. But desperation and fury turned her into a force of nature. Her fists, claws, and sheer willpower cleared a path. By the time reinforcements arrived, she was already launching the pod into the abyss of space, leaving her homeworld and its treacherous leaders behind. Her victory was short-lived. The pod was old, its systems barely operational. Pursuers would not be far behind. As she drifted into uncharted space, her wounds began to take their toll. The escape had come at a cost. Her body ached, her luminous skin dimmed, and her mind swam with pain and exhaustion. She set the pod's course to the nearest habitable planet, a primitive world marked only as Earth in her navigation charts. It was a gamble, but she had no other choice. As she entered Earth's atmosphere, the pod shuddered violently. Flames licked at the small craft, and warning signals blared. She fought to keep the vessel stable, her hands trembling on the controls. With a deafening crash, the pod struck the surface, tearing through trees and soil before coming to a halt. Smoke filled the cabin, and the general, coughing and weak, forced the hatch open. The alien world around her was vibrant and raw. Dense forests stretched endlessly, their greens and browns a stark contrast to the sterile, metallic world she knew. The air was rich and unfamiliar, filling her lungs with a strange vitality even as her body screamed for rest. She stumbled out, collapsing onto the soft earth. Pain coursed through her as she assessed her injuries. Her left arm hung limp, her side was scorched, and her vision blurred. Yet, as she lay there, her mind remained sharp. She knew she could not remain exposed. Her enemies would track the pod's trajectory. She needed to find shelter, to recover her strength. Summoning the last reserves of her willpower, she crawled toward the denser undergrowth, leaving a faint trail of luminous blood in her wake. Hours passed, or perhaps days, it was impossible to tell. The alien sun shifted across the sky, casting strange shadows through the canopy. Her survival instincts kept her alive, though just barely. She drank from streams, grimacing at the taste, and scavenged edible plants based on her limited understanding of Earth's biology. Each movement was agony, but she refused to succumb. In the stillness of the forest, she finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. Her people had betrayed her, discarded her like a broken tool. The faces of those she had fought alongside flashed in her memory. She had given everything for them, and they had repaid her with chains. Rage burned within her, but it was tempered by a growing resolve. She would survive. She would not let their treachery define her end. As twilight fell, the sound of distant footsteps snapped her from her thoughts. Something, or someone, was approaching. She tensed, readying herself for another fight. The human lived alone in a remote stretch of wilderness, far from the chaos of modern society. Solitude had become a refuge, a deliberate choice after years spent in a world that demanded too much and gave too little in return. His days were a pattern of quiet survival, tending a small garden, hunting when necessary, and repairing the cabin he had rebuilt from the ruins of an abandoned structure. The forest was his companion, its sounds a language he had come to understand. It warned him of dangers and, at times, offered comfort in its steady, unchanging rhythm. One evening, as the sun dipped below the tree-line, a sound broke the harmony, a deep, unnatural roar followed by the shaking of the earth. It wasn't thunder, nor the distant rumble of a landslide. This was something different, something foreign. He hesitated only a moment before arming himself with the rifle he kept for protection and heading toward the source of the disturbance. The trail led him to a swath of scorched earth, trees torn asunder, and a metallic object embedded in the soil. It wasn't a plane, nor any craft he recognized. As he approached cautiously, the object emitted a faint hum, and he realized it was still active. Its surface was smooth, reflecting the pale moonlight, and strange symbols adorned its exterior. His instinct screamed to turn back, but curiosity pushed him forward. He wasn't the type to shy away from the unknown. The hatch of the craft was ajar, steam rising from within. Inside, he saw a figure, tall, humanoid, but distinctly alien. Its skin glowed faintly, casting an ethereal light. Blood, or what he assumed was blood, stained its body, a liquid shimmering faintly in hues he couldn't name. The creature's chest rose and fell weakly, its breathing labored. Despite its otherworldly appearance, there was something undeniably fragile about it, something that stirred an unexpected pang of sympathy. For a long moment, he stood there, torn between fear and the instinct to help. The creature opened its eyes, locking onto his. There was no aggression, only a desperate plea. Whatever it was no threat, not in this state. Against his better judgment, he slung the rifle over his shoulder and moved closer. Carefully, he extended a hand, gesturing in what he hoped was a universal signal of peace. The alien flinched but did not retreat. Encouraged, he helped it out of the wreckage, supporting its weight as they moved away from the craft. It leaned heavily on him, its strength almost gone. He guided it toward his cabin, the decision to help now fully made, even if he didn't fully understand why. Back at the cabin, he cleared a space on the floor, laying the creature down carefully. Its body was strange, unfamiliar, but he could see enough parallels to know it was gravely injured. He worked methodically, cleaning its wounds and applying bandages from his limited supplies. It didn't resist, its glowing eyes following his every move, as if trying to understand his intent. Communication was almost impossible. The creature spoke, but its words were a symphony of tones, incomprehensible to him. In return, it seemed to struggle to interpret his gestures and simple words. Still, they found a fragile rhythm of understanding. When he offered water, it drank. When he gestured for it to stay still, it complied. The effort to bridge their gap in understanding felt surreal, but it was not without its small successes. As days passed, the alien began to recover. Its glowing skin regained some of its brilliance, and its movements became less labored. In turn, it began to observe him more closely, its curiosity evident. It studied his tools, his food, and the strange rituals of his daily life. At times, it mimicked his actions, attempting to understand the human's strange ways. Slowly, their wariness began to ebb, replaced by a tentative trust. One evening, as he was repairing a broken axe handle, the alien reached out, gesturing toward his tools. He handed it a simple carving knife, watching as it examined the object with an intensity that suggested a mind far sharper than his own. To his surprise, it began to carve a symbol into a piece of wood, a mirror of one of the markings on its craft. The act was deliberate, precise, and it seemed to convey a message: intelligence, understanding, and gratitude. In return, he began to share more of his world. He showed it the constellations visible from Earth, pointing out patterns in the night sky. It responded by tracing different patterns, indicating stars he couldn't see, likely ones visible from its home. This exchange became a ritual, a silent dialogue between two beings from vastly different worlds. There were moments of tension, too. The alien's strength returned rapidly, and with it came flashes of a warrior's instincts. Once, when a wild animal wandered too close to the cabin, it reacted with startling speed, incapacitating the creature with a weapon he hadn't even noticed it had salvaged. Its efficiency was unsettling, a reminder that this being was far more than a helpless survivor. Despite this, the bond between them grew. They were two outcasts, each finding an unexpected ally in the other. The human didn't ask where it had come from or why it had crashed here, sensing that such questions would come in time, or perhaps not at all. For now, survival was their shared goal, and that was enough. As the days stretched into weeks, the human began to notice changes in himself. The alien's presence forced him to confront his own isolation, his reasons for retreating from a world that had once been his home. In its quiet determination to heal and adapt, he saw a reflection of struggles he had buried long ago. Without words, the alien reminded him of something he had forgotten: the capacity for resilience and connection, even in the face of the unknown. The alien had recovered enough to stand on its own, its movements now fluid and deliberate, though a faint weariness lingered. Communication between them had improved, albeit rudimentary. They had developed a mix of gestures, sounds, and expressions to convey basic ideas. The alien, sharp and perceptive, quickly adapted to their shared environment. However, its urgency grew clear. It spent hours studying the surroundings, its gaze frequently turning skyward, scanning for something, or someone. One evening, as the human was preparing a simple meal, the alien pointed to the sky and then drew a series of lines in the dirt. The shapes resembled spacecraft trajectories, accompanied by the unmistakable symbol of pursuit. Its message was clear: others were coming. The human didn't need advanced technology to recognize danger. Whoever these pursuers were, they wouldn't be arriving with peaceful intentions. Understanding the stakes, the human began preparing in earnest. The alien contributed, demonstrating a surprising depth of strategic knowledge. It pointed out defensive positions around the cabin and identified materials that could be repurposed into makeshift traps. Despite its alien origin, its grasp of survival tactics was intuitive, and it respected the human's input. They worked as a team, each compensating for the other's limitations. The alien provided technology salvaged from its crash, including a handheld device that emitted a faint energy field. Though its full capabilities were unclear, the human quickly recognized its potential as a defensive tool. Together, they adapted the device, incorporating it into a perimeter alarm system to detect intruders. The alien, visibly impressed by the human's ingenuity, began to trust him with more of its technology, a silent acknowledgement of their growing partnership. The human's skills were grounded in practicality, camouflaging the cabin, setting snares, and fortifying weak points in the structure. The alien, on the other hand, offered precision and a futuristic perspective, turning scavenged materials into lethal defenses. It fashioned compact weapons using fragments of its ship, their destructive power evident even in rudimentary tests. The cabin, once a simple sanctuary, transformed into a stronghold, bristling with hidden dangers for anyone who dared approach uninvited. During their preparations, the human noticed subtle changes in the alien's demeanor. Its initial cold detachment softened, replaced by a quiet intensity. It spoke more frequently now, its melodic tones punctuated by deliberate gestures that conveyed urgency. Through their fragmented communication, the human pieced together fragments of its story: betrayal, a pursuit driven by power, and the desperate need to survive. Though the details were incomplete, the emotion behind them was unmistakable. The days were spent building and strategizing, but the nights brought reflection. The alien sat by the fire, its gaze distant, as though haunted by memories it couldn't share. The human, too, found himself drawn into the gravity of the situation. He had lived a life defined by avoidance, retreating from a world he deemed too complex and cruel. Now, he faced a threat far beyond anything he could have imagined, yet for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose. Their bond deepened as the first signs of danger emerged. The alien's device, configured as a scanner, detected a faint signal in the atmosphere, an approaching craft. The human recognized the alien's reaction immediately, its body tensed, and its luminous skin dimmed slightly, as though steeling itself for what was to come. The human responded in kind, tightening the defenses they had built and preparing for the confrontation they both knew was inevitable. The alien worked tirelessly, refining its makeshift weapons and adjusting their traps with precision. The human, though less technologically adept, contributed his resourcefulness, identifying natural choke points and using the terrain to their advantage. Together, they created an intricate web of defenses that combined the best of their respective skills. As the day of reckoning approached, the human took stock of their preparations. The forest surrounding the cabin was riddled with hidden surprises, pits lined with sharpened stakes, tripwires rigged to release explosive charges fashioned from salvaged materials, and a network of escape routes in case the worst came to pass. Inside the cabin, they had stockpiled supplies, turning it into a last stand should their outer defenses fail. Despite their efforts, the human couldn't ignore the weight of uncertainty. The alien's pursuers were an unknown force, potentially armed with technology far beyond his comprehension. He knew their preparations might not be enough, but there was no alternative. Their only chance was to fight, to leverage their ingenuity against an enemy that undoubtedly underestimated them. In the quiet moments before the confrontation, the alien offered a gesture of gratitude. It placed a hand on the human's shoulder, its luminous skin casting a faint glow in the dim light. No words were exchanged, but the meaning was clear. They were no longer just two beings thrown together by circumstance. They were allies, bound by a shared determination to survive. As the first scout ship appeared on the horizon, its silhouette cutting through the evening sky, the human and the alien took their positions. The stage was set, their defenses ready. The battle for survival was about to begin. The hum of the approaching ship grew louder, its sleek silhouette slicing through the darkened sky. The human crouched low, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the treetops. Beside him, the alien's glowing skin pulsed faintly, a sign of readiness. They exchanged a brief glance. No words, no gestures, just a shared understanding of what was about to unfold. The first strike came without warning. A burst of plasma fire erupted from the scout ship, scorching the ground and splitting trees. The human barely had time to duck behind a reinforced barrier they had constructed. The alien retaliated instantly, activating one of their makeshift traps. A concentrated energy pulse from the salvage device struck the ship's hull, destabilizing its hovering engines. It wobbled, veering off course and clipping a nearby tree before crashing into the dense forest. The pursuers emerged, sleek figures clad in dark armor that shimmered with advanced cloaking tech. They moved with precision, spreading out to surround the cabin. The alien signaled to the human, pointing toward the perimeter traps. The human nodded and triggered the first line of defenses. Explosions rippled through the forest, catching the invaders off guard. Several were thrown back by the force, their armor cracking under the pressure. The human aimed carefully, picking off targets with his rifle. His shots were precise, each one guided by years of hunting in the wild. Beside him, the alien moved like a phantom, using its natural agility and salvaged weaponry to outmaneuver the attackers. A single sweep of its energy blade cut through the cloaked figures, their advanced tech proving no match for its raw skill. As the battle raged, the human realized the invaders were not just after the alien, they were intent on destruction. Their weapons tore through trees and defenses alike, each blast coming closer to the cabin. The traps slowed them but didn't stop them entirely. For every attacker they took down, more seemed to appear, their numbers overwhelming. The alien, despite its strength, began to falter. A blast caught it in the side, sending it sprawling to the ground. The human rushed to its side, dragging it behind cover. It gestured urgently, handing him a small device, a last resort, judging by the intensity in its glowing eyes. The human hesitated for only a moment before tucking it into his pocket and returning to the fight. The attackers pressed forward, breaching the outer defenses. Inside the cabin, the human and alien made their stand. The alien activated a shield generator, creating a temporary barrier that deflected the incoming fire. The human used the brief reprieve to pick off more enemies, his aim steady despite the chaos. When the shield began to falter, the alien activated the device it had given the human earlier. A surge of energy rippled outward, disabling the invaders' cloaking tech and scrambling their communication systems. Disoriented, the attackers became easy targets. The human and alien exploited the moment, striking with precision and ferocity. Still, the numbers were against them. As the final wave approached, the human saw the alien struggling to stay on its feet. Blood, luminous and strange, streaked its body, yet its resolve remained unbroken. The human felt a surge of determination. He grabbed a makeshift explosive they had crafted and hurled it into the largest cluster of invaders. The blast was deafening, scattering debris, and silence momentarily enveloped the battlefield. When the dust settled, the forest was unrecognizable. The invaders lay defeated, their armor shattered, their weapons silent. The alien sank to the ground, exhaustion evident in every movement. The human knelt beside it, checking for signs of life. Though battered and bruised, the alien gave a faint nod, its luminous eyes conveying gratitude and relief. The human helped it to its feet, and together they surveyed the wreckage. The scout ship, heavily damaged, emitted faint plumes of smoke. They both knew more would come. The human gestured toward the cabin, then the distant horizon, indicating the need to leave. The alien hesitated before nodding. Survival meant moving forward, leaving this place behind. As they gathered what little they could salvage, the human paused, looking at the alien. It had come to Earth as an outsider, yet in its resilience and strength, it had become something more, a reminder of what it meant to fight for survival, to trust, and to forge bonds even in the face of overwhelming odds. The two disappeared into the forest, their figures blending into the shadows. Though the battle was over, their journey had only just begun.